Madeira, Manchester, Madrid, Turin, and Manchester again. Aguero! Goal for South Africa! Goal for all Africa! Roma have risen from their ruins!
Welcome back to the On a Yellow podcast, episode 21, Full Swing. Now, how are you doing today, Zach? It's a bit snowy outside.
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good myself. Kind of done with the snow for the year, though.
Yeah, I know. It seems like every episode it seems like the weather is different almost every single episode. I mean, the first episodes, we had no snow on the ground. It was still sunny skies. I think we had an episode where it was like 25 degrees outside. And, it was kind of the tale of, two extremes, because we had another episode a couple episodes ago, I think episode like 17 or 16 or 17, that was minus 36. So, it's a tale of two extremes. And now, it's not as cold, but it is just started to snow, and we're expected more. So, I'm ready for the snow to end as well. We have quite a lot of things to talk about today. It's full swing, so that means Canadian football is back. And we saw this weekend the first couple matches of the Canadian Premier League. Let's move on to the Forge game. We talked about Forge obviously winning 2-0, and it was kind of a dominating display. Like, what are your thoughts on that, Zach?
I had to find my notes.
No worries.
They're a little bit hidden here. A big win, I think, Ottawa having won the league last year in the playoffs, and I think kind of having been that team to beat last year, I think this year's going to be a bit of a down year. They lost a lot of their players coming into the season, and I think, losing your starting striker and a guy who led the league in goals is going to change how your team operates on attack. And I think it was very obvious to see that in the first game. They had no real chances, in my opinion, and a game where they were properly outclassed from striker to goalkeeper in the entire team, I think. And kind of a match where they can see that and see where they compare to other teams and how they can kind of adjust that play style to get the best out of what they have this season.
Exactly. I think their attack was a bit disjointed for sure. Obviously, they lost Salter, who moved on to Sweden. Now, one thing, I think it doesn't really, it's not going to really impact Atletico Ottawa. I think Atletico Ottawa is still going to be competitive. Obviously, this is just the first game of the season, but I think, not registering a single shot is alarming. 0 shots on target and 0 shots on goal in a full 90 minutes of play is something that you don't see in the Canadian Premier League that often, as the Canadian Premier League is known for having a ton of shots during their games. And I don't know. I look at it and I think Forge played a very good display, and I think that's also another reason why Atletico Ottawa couldn't register a shot. I think on and off the ball, Forge was a dominant team. They played very, very well. And it's just something that I think Forge needed after last season, where they fell short of what they really wanted to, especially being a team that is, wins a lot of championships and a lot of games in the CPL. I think they would want a little bit more from last season. Obviously, Brian Wright, he got the first goal in the Canadian Premier League. And I think it was the first ever challenge as well, which was failed. It was a failed challenge by Atletico Ottawa. And, he took his penalty well, and I think he did a good job. moving on, of course, Peyton, he scored. And he normally doesn't score, and that was kind of cool. It was cool to see that both brothers scored during this match week, and it's just another really cool thing to see that we have brothers playing in the CPL here.
Well, there's another set of brothers,
Yes,
the Baldissimo brothers.
exactly. So we have multiple brothers playing, and obviously Baldissimo played against Baldissimo on Sunday. But I think Forge had a great display. But one thing as well, I want to kind of preface this. Atletico Ottawa had a majority of the possession that game, but they had 0 shots. Forge, at the end of the game, only had 35% possession, but they had 10 shots and 4 on target, and 21 touches in the opposition box. I mean, Dimitri Bertaud, he had, of course, a clean sheet, obviously, but didn't have to make any saves. And I think it just shows how good Forge is with how they're playing, the style of play. They're extremely aggressive.
Does it speak to how strong Forge is defensively this season with who they have on that backline? I think it's a little bit kind of gone under the radar, and having the lower half of the possession and then only keeping your opponent to 4 touches in your box is impressive from the defenders.
Exactly. I mean, also it comes from the midfield as well. The midfield were dominant in that game. One guy, Anthony Aramatario, played absolutely insane on his debut in the Canadian Premier League for Forge, and he also started the game and played the full 90 as well. He's 22 years of age. It's his first season with the Forge, and he got a man of the match during that game, and he played. I think it's just something for him. He's a really good footballer with a really promising ceiling. A lot of people are thinking that he will play for the Forge, but move on to greater heights, maybe in North America or in Europe. And I think that is totally warranted. 22 years old, but he's extremely confident and composed on the ball, and especially in the midfield. He dominated that game, and he played an extremely good two-way game where he where he was good defensively, but he was also good on attack. A cool thing about Armatario is he actually won the national championship last year with York University in U Sports. Of course, beating MRU in that snowy game in the finals where they won eventually, and he showed great confidence within U Sports, and I think he showed how good he is. But now he's moving on to greater heights, and he's playing very, very good. And I think he causes a lot of trouble. I saw that he drew 2 fouls, and 2 of them being yellow cards, and he really showed how good of a player he is. And he played 119 minutes against Tigres in 2 legs, where of course Tigres was able to beat Forge in the end, but he was kind of the reason why they drew against Forge for the first game. And obviously it went back to Tigres with 25,000 people, and Tigres were able to win 4-1. But Armatario was one of the main people facilitating that attack, and also being kind of a guy in the midfield that you can rely on to play both sides. What are your thoughts on him, Zach?
Well, he played in the Ontario Premier League as well.
Yes.
And he was a standout there and got the call up to the big leagues here in Canada. And I think he proved that he was ready for that step. And he's a player who's kind of gone through the entire pathway in Canada now, from university to Ontario Premier League to CPL. It's good to see that the pathway does in fact work, especially with the new rebrand and how much time and effort Canada Football is putting into the league here in Canada.
Yes.
It's good to see a player already proving that the pathway is real.
Exactly. He's proving, that that Canada can be a footballing nation in all levels and can grow talent from grassroots all the way to professional. And you know, it's really cool because he's one of the first people to do that. You know, we've had some success, but he's kind of the next generation of Canadian football stars and coming through the grassroots game. Now, moving on to Halifax versus Vancouver FC. So Halifax beat Vancouver FC 1-0, but it didn't really seem like it should have been a win for Halifax. More likely a draw. What's your thoughts on that game?
Well, I think you can go with the path that it should have been a draw, but then maybe they shouldn't have drawn the free kick, and maybe the goalie should have saved it.
Yes.
But you know, it's kind of hard to say that a team didn't deserve the win when they score a goal. You know, a goal that you didn't really expect, and a goal from 30 yards out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's deserved when if your team defends well enough to keep the other team from scoring, and you score, doesn't really matter how. I think it's kind of hard to chalk it up as you didn't deserve the win unless it's like you have 10% of the possession and you scored from the halfway line and they had like 40 shots on net, then maybe you don't deserve the win. But I think it just proves that Vancouver has to be better. And, you know, they grew a lot last season, making it to the Canadian Championship final, playing in the CONCACAF Champions League. And now they need to level up their game domestically as well. And I think this season is going to be an important one to see if they can take that next step and not finish last.
Yeah, and I think it's really promising for Vancouver. Obviously, they were kind of labeled the best worst team with their playoff game, and I think, you know, they actually played pretty well during that game. Obviously, a goal would have helped and would have made them raise. I just think would have made them a bit happier. I mean, to be honest, they had 54% possession, 17 shots, 5 on target, and 27 touches in Halifax's box. You know, if Halifax didn't have Marco Carducci in that net, I think the game would have been a little bit different and might have favored Vancouver. You know, you have 17 shots, but, you know, 5 of them on target, and Carducci's making 5 saves, and some of them being really crucial saves that made it so that Halifax could win. Halifax didn't have that much chances. That free kick was probably their best chance of the game, and Caligari took it extremely well. It was one of those that you just knew was going to go in when he hit it, and it went and sailed right into the top corner. And I think it's just I think it's something that, yeah, Vancouver can build upon to get to that next level and be a team that is fighting for championships, like a Cavalry, like a Forge, like Atletico Ottawa, who are kind of our mainstays within who's fighting for the title. And I think it's just, you know, only time will tell. I mean, for Vancouver's game, I think you have to judge it when they play against really tough teams within this league. You know, Halifax is a great team, but, you know, Cavalry, the Forge, Atletico Ottawa, all these teams are extremely tough teams with extremely good players. And you know, that's when you judge a book by that's when you judge the team by the cover of how they're playing, based on how they play against those teams. Obviously, Marco Carducci, like I said, made 5 saves, and he had an 8.2 rating, and he played really well. Obviously, he said that he was going to leave Cavalry at the end of the season, and he did, so that he could get a new challenge. I don't really know, in my opinion, as a Cavalry FC fan, if Halifax is a new challenge, seeing that when you say that, to me, it seems like you want to go to a different league. But obviously, Halifax is a team that isn't as good as and solid as the Cavs are, and don't have as much depth as the Cavs do. And I guess a new challenge would be, you know, he's getting more shots day in and day out. And that's my opinion.
I think Halifax is a team that's grown a lot in the last couple of years. They've made some good signings. I think they have some of the better players in the league on their team for sure. And I think, you know, they've kind of they've been growing. They've been moving up the table slightly. I think this season could be a kind of a big one for them. I think they could kind of surprise people and maybe even finish second this year.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they are a very good team. Obviously, with Carducci, that's an added plus. Finishing second, I don't really know. I think they might finish mid-table, maybe third place. Battling with Atletico Ottawa for that for third place. I think they're a mid-table team. I mean, they beat Vancouver, but they didn't beat Vancouver by much. They beat them by 1 goal, and
we beat Pacific by 1 goal, and Pacific's kind of mocked to be the worst team in the league this year.
That's fair. So maybe it is.
You can't really tell by the first.
It is the first game, right? Like you can't really tell.
I do think Halifax has a team that they can perform very well and kind of pick up shock victories here and there. With I think Ottawa having a bad season this year, I think it opens up the room for them to finish second. In my opinion, that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
They've been a team kind of in that fourth and third kind of fight for a lot of years, and I think this would be the season where they move up.
It could be. I think Cavs have an extremely strong team and Forge have an extremely top team that I think that they will be the ones that are getting the first and second, with Atletico Ottawa being third or fourth, depending on how Halifax does. I do agree. They could be a team that gets shock victories, and that could help them in the end to make it to the highest place that they've ever gotten before. Now, Halifax did well, and I thought they had a great game. And moving on to Cavalry FC, our boys in red, they beat Pacific FC 2-1. What's your thoughts on that game?
I think it was a good first half. They played their game in the first half, and then in the second half, they were kind of gliding a little bit, and then Pacific gets one back, and then it's kind of a little bit of panic mode. I think trying to just keep the win, and I think it was interesting to see how the bench, like who was on the bench for that game and who got put on for that game, and I think it was good to see lots of debuts and still pick up the win. But I think it was there were some players that I think were very strong on their debuts, and there was a couple players that I don't think had the greatest displays against, and when they got put on. I think it's time when they kind of fit into the league a little bit more, it could kind of be a little bit better. But I think there was a couple players such as Ofori and Edwards kind of after they got put onto that same side, where I think they were kind of trying to play a little bit over top of each other. They're both trying to impress, and I think it kind of didn't work out for either one of them, and they kind of gave the ball away a couple times on the side there. But I think as the season progresses, it'll be a little bit safer on that side, especially since we have Gauthier and Tignay who I think can play a full 90. I think they just wanted to put fresh legs on to try and keep the result the way it was.
Yeah, I think, obviously 2-1 against Pacific is something that for the Cavs, they, obviously it's a win, but they would want to win more comfortably. I think our first half, like you said, was very good. We played our game and we played very, very well. And it was kind of, it was, I think we were guaranteed a goal in that first half based off how we were playing. And obviously we got it through the penalty, but we were playing very, very strong. And we were testing their back line. I think, the second half was where the worries came in. Pacific picked it up at the end. Obviously they snatched a goal from us. And they did really well. I think for Pacific, it's an extremely commendable performance in the second half. If Pacific plays like that, they can definitely get some shocked victories in the CPL. I mean, obviously, the Pacific haven't been great in their tenure in the CPL, but I think they could be a team that could possibly make it mid-table this season, maybe not last. if they play like that against Calvary. Now, again, it's hard to tell with all these games because it was the first, it's the first kind of, first games, right? We don't really know how the other teams are going to play. We haven't seen Inter Toronto play yet, and we haven't seen Supra play yet. So I think only time will tell with those two teams. But I think it's going to be a good season. I mean, all the teams are looking really good, and the style and the type of play and how the league is getting played this season. I think we have a lot more skill than we've had before, and I just think it's going to be good. Who are the standout players for that Cavs team, do you think, during that game?
I thought that Harry Patton was creating a lot. He added a lot of stability in the middle of the field. He obviously scored the game-winning goal. And I think, he adds a lot of what Shome added to the team last year that we lost. And I think it's good to get that player in. And I think, Perlman is a good replacement for Fraser Aird. I think he had a good game. He was going on runs. He was trying to create from the back. And he was strong defensively as well.
Yeah, I think Payton played extremely well. He took his goal really well, but he was the facilitator that whole game. He was a box-to-box player, and yeah, we kind of missed that with losing Shome, and we picked it up, and obviously, Payton has played in Scotland. He's played in Europe. Like he's played in some top leagues, and now he's coming back to the CPL, and he's playing very, very strong. I think he plays with this confidence, and that's what I really, really like. I think with our midfield last season, we kind of missed that a little bit. We kind of missed a facilitator. And I think we picked it up towards the end of the season, but definitely at the start of the season, we missed this facilitator that could facilitate attacks, in my opinion. And Payton is that guy. One guy I could say, I said it before, right? We talked about when Payton signed, and we talked about, the player that he is. And we were correct. He couldn't get off the ball very easily. He drew fouls because of how good his dribbling was. And that's something we needed in the midfield. And again, he's another voice in the dressing room. He's another player that can bring up the other midfielders that don't get as much game time. He could be a mentor to the future players of our team. And he played extremely well. He had 2 shots on target. He had an 8.6 rating in his debut. He just facilitated that midfield. He constantly created plays, and he played with that cool confidence, like I said. And, as well, Perlman, like you said, played extremely well. I mean, there's some big shoes to fill when you're filling the shoes of Fraser Aird, being the replacement for Fraser Aird. And I think he did it. He played very, very well. Do you want to continue?
Well, I kind of already said my piece on these guys.
What's your thoughts on Didic? Because I thought he played really well.
I think he wasn't that noticeable, in my opinion. He was kind of just there and did his job well. I think he kind of he blended in seamlessly with the team, and I think he's a player who I think we can lean on in defense. I think he didn't really have to do too much in terms of defending, but he played a good game, making lots of passes, I think, into kind of crucial areas, and kind of a guy who, he's kind of that big defender that I think, a lot of teams have come to appreciate now, where he's so big where it's so hard to kind of, get a shot past him even. And he's a guy who he's I don't know how to say it, but he's someone that you can see, causing a ton of problems for teams on the attack.
Yeah, and I mean, I think he played really well with Klomp, and both of those two players played really well for our side, and we had kind of a solid back line. I think Didic played extremely well. I loved his link-up play. he didn't really have the rating that you would see and you would think that had a good game, but he was that quiet defender that had a very good game. You know, he's like very tall and a big body, right? It's hard to get past him. But he also is like really good at his passing game. He had 11 passes into our final third, which was probably one of the most it was the most out of anybody on our team. And you know, that's what we need with our center backs. Obviously, the Cavs play a game where we like to pass it around our back line, then move it up forward either through the midfield or through our wingers. And, you know, we need center backs that can play the ball. And he played really well. And I think I'm excited to see how that dynamic between him and Klomp is going to play out, because I feel like those are two very strong defenders. And I mean, I think I think all the acquisitions that we got this offseason played that game. And almost all of them, in my opinion, especially the starters, played extremely, they had a very commendable performance. And I think, you know, it's something to look forward to. I mean, again, only time will tell. It's the first game of the season. We can't really say anything about these teams yet. You know, until halfway through the season when we see kind of the table shape out, and the players shine. What I can say about these games is, you know, I think they're a good start to the CPL season for a lot of teams. I think most teams, except really Atletico Ottawa, had a performance in which they would want to change, like extremely change things. I think Pacific played well. They played their game. Obviously, they want to get a better result. Same thing with Vancouver. I think Vancouver played very well. It's just they need to change a couple things. And of course, the people that won are going to be happy about winning. But it's a very commendable performance for a lot of teams. Now, during the CPL, we had the FVS system at full display for the new rules that FIFA is trialing in our league. What's your thoughts on FVS?
I think I like that we have some sort of video support, you know, to get the calls correct. I do like that, you know, the coaches have to challenge it, which means the coaches have to be, you know, on their game as well. You know, it adds another layer to what the coaches have to do. But the system, I think, has to be streamlined a little bit. I think the refs themselves need some sort of control over the video instead of telling somebody to, you know, go back to this frame, go frame by frame. No, go back. There's a lot of back and forth and a little bit of miscommunication between the fourth official and the head ref. And I think it takes far too long for them to look at, you know, I don't think they necessarily need to look at every goal. You know, if there's not something glaringly obvious, that I think it kind of just takes a lot of time from the game, and it gives us a lot more added time at the end of games, which I think it's kind of unnecessary to look at. You know, Harry Patton's goal, for example, off the corner, and they were trying to, you know, they watched every single frame back to see if there was any sort of foul at all, and if it's not glaringly obvious in the replay, I don't think you should be having to view every single thing like that. And I think if you want to look at it, you have to start the play again instead of just keeping the player standing at midfield for 5 minutes while you look at a goal that's definitely going to stand.
Yeah, exactly. I think, you know, it's something that was needed, like you said. Like, I think football video support was needed for the implementation of the new system. But I think that, you know, we struggled a little bit. I think the refs struggled a little bit with this new system. I think the offside rule was fine. It's not really that different from the offside rule we have now. I think it's easier for linesmen because you can just see the distance between the player and then they're offside. But I think, you know, there was a ton of added time. I mean, just a ton of time wasted after every single goal, having to wait for the fourth official to look over the goal to make sure that it's a good goal and that nothing happened. I think it needs to be streamlined a
Well,
bit more.
And at the end of the Cavalry game, there was a challenge. I can't remember who did it, but and then Tommy kind of challenges it to.
Yeah.
I don't know for what reason, because it was the end of the game anyway.
He wanted to challenge for a straight, like another yellow for a red card. We want like a straight red.
It was the 97th minute or something, and
Yeah.
then that kind of just added another 5 minutes to the game for no reason, really.
Well, we had a +7 like at a time.
It was +7, and then at the end of that, he challenged it, and there was like 102 at the end of the game.
I think
and then they blew the whistle.
I think we were trying. All the coaches and managers were just trying to utilize the new system. So I think that they just any chance that they could possibly spin their finger in a circle and call for it to be challenged. I think they did. I just think that it definitely needs to be streamlined a little bit more. We need to get better at it. I think there's going to be less people appealing for things, seeing that it's just a new system. They're trying to test the waters a little bit. But yeah, I think a system that was meant to reduce the time of matches and reduce the stoppages has caused more stoppages, in my opinion, than the old system, because after every goal, the fourth official has to go to the monitor and he has to check. But it's not like he can move the frames himself. He has to tell like a guy in like a switcher box to like move the frames for him and move it back to here, move it to here, move it to this frame, move it to this camera. And he can't just like go and press the camera that he wants to see himself. And I think that honestly adds more time, because now, the guy has to talk to him, then the guy has to move, and then obviously it's not going to be the same angle that the referee wants, and then they have to go again. And then when they deem that something is like a possible penalty or something is a possible no goal because of offside, the actual on-field referee has to come to the monitor as well. And I think there was some weird miscommunication between the fourth official and the referee, especially in the Cavs game. It seemed to take so long for them to actually get a solid yes, it's a goal, or no, it's not a goal at all, and especially the penalty as well. And it's just like, I just think it was a bunch of added time. I feel like they could still look at each goal, but I feel like the game could still be played. And then if the goal is deemed to be having the ref to have a look at, then the fourth official can ask the ref to blow the whistle, and then they can go to the booth, right? It's the same thing that happens with VAR, right? The video assistant referee looks at the play while the play is still going on, and then sometimes has to call the ref back to that particular moment or to the monitor to see if it was a possible penalty. I just think that it was just added time for no reason. And just something that I think definitely will be ironed out in the future. So, we have 20 minutes here, and we had the international break, and there's a couple of games that I want to talk about, but I want to talk about Team Canada's performance. Zach, what is your thoughts on Team Canada's last two friendlies? One against Iceland and one against Tunisia.
They need to learn how to score from open play again.
Yes.
I think it's been far too long since we've scored an actual
When was
goal.
the last time we scored a goal from open play?
I can't even remember. It's been way too long. I think we're dependent on penalties at this point, and I think we need to be practicing how to break down a defense and get scoring opportunities and finish them, and it's just not happening. We haven't won in the last 6 games, and it's been kind of a rough stretch, and we've kind of gone down the rankings a couple times because of it. And going into the World Cup, we only have two friendlies left against Uzbekistan and I believe Ireland. And if we don't score from open play in those games, I'm going to be very worried for the World Cup.
Yeah, and I mean, I think I watched both the games, and it seemed like the Iceland game, we got saved by the penalties, and then the Tunisia game,
we got saved by Liam Miller.
Yeah, exactly. We got saved by Liam Miller.
I think the team needs to step up. These are the kind of opponents that in the World Cup you see in your group and you're like, that's a definite win. But for us right now, it might be even a loss. And I think it needs to be smoothed out, and I think the system needs to be a little bit changed and kind of fixed a little bit before we get into the World Cup, because having 0 goals from open play, and I believe like the last 4 games or something, and no wins. Sure, we've been unbeaten in the last 6, but no wins in that stretch is not really an accomplishment.
Do you think that it's
We
like?
haven't played any good teams.
Do you
really.
think it's a formation thing? Like, do you think the 4-4-2 formation is working for our team? Because it seems like our strikers, even though we have 2 strikers, it seems like they're never getting involved with the game at all.
Well, I think
Like, I
When
think
we
Jonathan
have-
David had like 2 touches last game.
it's hard to tell because it's kind of what we've been using for so long. We got good results with it under Jesse Marsh, and now it's just kind of stopped.
It's
and-
rough
and
right now,
it's
isn't it?
Been slow, and I think maybe you try a different formation, but with the players that we have, I don't think there's necessarily another formation that really works that well. We have the strikers to do a 2-man at the top formation. We have the wingers that can play service to those guys, and we have midfielders who can be box to box. And I think it's just they need to be a little bit more cohesive in the way they play. And I think we're trying to be a little bit too dependent on rushing it down the wing and kind of just breaking into the box and then getting a pass across the front of the net. I think we need to try and be a little bit more creative and kind of try and open up a shooting lane for your striker, or get the cross in instead of just trying to get a foul in the box for a penalty.
It seemed like a lot of our play was, like getting it to the wing, crossing it into the box. But we don't really have players in that box that are guys that like head the ball all the time, like that are known for heading the ball. And a lot of the times the deliveries were either poor or there was just no one there to make a play out of it. That works sometimes, but like you said, like there's nothing. I don't know. We haven't scored, so I think we have to go down to basics. I mean, never once did I see Jonathan David go on a rush from a through ball, going past the defenders and actually being able to just have a shot on net. And Tanny I didn't see at all either. Tanny had a good play as well. I think part of it is I think we need to be better finishers. There's something that we struggled with, and that was actually scoring. Iceland game, Jonathan David had a couple chances, but shot them right at the keeper or like completely far above the net. When you're right back, in my opinion, with Sigur, is that
Nico,
yeah, with our right back. When your right back has probably the best shot of the game and the best chance of the game, there's a problem there, right? And I just think that, we were saved by Liam Miller. I think, Tunisia should have won that game. I don't think the guy should have passed it across for Liam Miller to make that save. I think the guy should have just shot it. It was, you had Crepeau backpedaling. Like you had the goal. If you just kind of opened up and shot it in the right corner. And, I think we played a pretty decent display. I just think, again, it's finishing that's the problem.
Didn't really have any good opportunities to score at all
exactly.
against Tunisia. They played very well defensively. We couldn't break them down whatsoever on the attack. And I think it's kind of been a story of a lot of our recent games is we cannot break down the other team's defenders. And it needs to be something that we focus on in the next training camp. We can't go into the World Cup not being able to score a goal.
Now, for the strikers, do you think Jonathan David is like he's going to be starting?
Yes.
Yeah.
We don't have anyone else.
But
really.
who do you think is going to be in that left striker position?
Tanny,
Tanny, Laren?
pray that it's Promise David.
Yeah.
If it's not them, I think it's going to be kind of scary.
Yeah.
Because I don't trust any of our other strikers to perform on the national team level. Tanny maybe scored 1 or 2 goals for us in the national team, and I think that was right at his beginning of the time with the national team. And since then, trying to move into a bigger role, he hasn't done anything. and Kyle Larin, sure, he's picked up a little bit of form for his club teams, but he hasn't really gotten that many opportunities for the Canadian national team recently, and I think he's kind of out of favor. He's not really the kind of player that I think we need to be able to lean on, and at the worst case scenario, one of those guys is going to be starting at the World Cup, and
Yeah.
I think if Promise David can get back healthy, he is in physio. He's trying to get back to healthy now. And, if he can get some sort of game time before the World Cup, maybe. But if not, it's kind of maybe even just give Arabim Pepple a chance.
Yeah.
'Cause at this point, he's the best performing one for his club. He has goals on his mind. He's had that success recently scoring goals, and I think that can translate to a higher level. And I think having scored recently, and a lot recently, he's seeing the game a little bit better than any of our other strikers.
He's confident. He has confidence. Tani Alabashai has barely played for Villarreal in recent months. And, I think Larin, of course, he's done decent at Southampton. He scored a couple goals, but, again, like, I think, Promise David is our best bet. I saw from that left striker position. Actually, to be honest, both strikers. I don't think Jonathan David played well, but it's not. You can't take him out of the squad. Like, he's our main guy, right?
Well, he's the all-time leading Canadian goal scorer. You can't take him out of your lineup if you want to expect to score goals.
I think both of them played poor, but again, they had no delivery, so it's like they barely had like a touch on the ball, and I think a bright light in that would be Marcelo Flores. I think he played very well. I think the only problem with Marcelo Flores that I'm finding is, he tries to do too much sometimes.
I think he holds on to the ball a little bit too long.
Yeah.
Sometimes when he could have laid the pass off, he's trying to break down the defense, which I like. He's trying to get a defender out of position, but then he holds on to the ball for a little too long and gets kind of swarmed and loses it.
Or we cross it in and there's no one. Like, what I found is that when we cross the ball in, if we're using a 4-4-2 formation and we're having to cross the ball in, you need to have players in that box that can head the ball and can receive that cross, right? Because like what happened was we would cross the ball and no play would happen because the defenders on Tunisia and even Iceland would just head the ball away and clear the ball out. We couldn't get a handle on it.
Well, we had 9 corners against Tunisia and 8 against Iceland. Not a single chance generated off of them even. And I think we need somebody who's either better at crossing the ball on a corner, or we need somebody who can get to the ball in the box.
Promise David's that guy.
He doesn't really score that many headers, though, either.
True. I don't know. Like, again, it's
we don't really have anybody that's good on corners at all on our team. We have guys who can try and get the ball in. And I find it kind of funny how the commentators were kind of talking about how Junior Hoylett, he can really cross the ball in, but every single time that guy took a corner was straight to the first defender on the outside of the box. And I think his time with the team has to be done. He's playing for Swindon Town. How is he still getting called up?
And he's getting
like
game
35.
Time. He's getting game time, where it's like Bim, in my opinion, should have got game time, especially in the Tunisia game when, when we subbed people off and put people in. Like, in my opinion, you just put Bim in. You want a goal, obviously. It's not like you have anything to really prove. Like, it's either that or a loss. I would take the draw, but again, we need the win. Canadian football needs the win. Again, another extreme below is, of course, Priso. Priso's out right now, but he's not going to be out that long.
I don't think it's that big of a blow, considering it's his first 2 games with the team.
But in my opinion, I don't know. Like, we need to really, we need our good defenseman back, in my opinion. I don't want to be that guy, but we are kind of using our third string defensive pairing, and and it's not like it's not been bad. Like obviously in the Tunisia game they didn't score, but like it's not been great either. Kamal Miller, I think he's been poor for the side for the stuff he's been playing. Like obviously he played and came on, but I think he's been really I just think I think he's been poor like defensively. Waterman, like again, like he's all right, but it's nothing. Both of those guys, it's nothing compared to, a Cornelius, and other players like that, a Bombito, who obviously are probably going to be back for the World Cup, but now haven't had game time. So the next couple of friendlies that we have before the World Cup is so paramount for our team's success. And I think right back and left back, I think Larea played decent. I think, Sigur played decent as well. Like I think both of them played decent. I don't have really anything to say about them. Midfield wise, I think we missed Eustachio. We didn't really facilitate the midfield that well. Saliba didn't have as good of a game as he did for the Iceland game, in my opinion. I think we have a lot of unanswered questions before this World Cup that honestly Canada didn't need. Now, we have 7 minutes left in this podcast episode. I just want to talk about Canada's group. So now the group is finally finalized. We know who that other team is, and it's not Italy. Italy are the first team to ever win the World Cup and not make it for 3 consecutive World Cups after, or 3 consecutive World Cups in a row, not after they won, but 3 consecutive World Cups in a row. Now, the team that beat them, Bosnia and Herzegovina, they're in the group with Canada, Switzerland, and Qatar. So what's your thoughts on that group? Like, we went into thinking about this group saying Canada should get out, but based off of our last form, I think it could be, if we play like we have been lately, it could be Canada might not make it out.
Well, I think with the teams you have in the group, it's a group you have to get out of.
Yes.
Especially as, we're home World Cup. I do think there'll be a bit of a bump once the World Cup comes around with it being a home World Cup. Mm-hmm. But I think we need to try and, in those last 2 friendlies, again, score some goals and win a game. Just in general, don't care who. We need to go into the World Cup having that confidence in ourselves.
Yeah.
Because the group that we have is very winnable.
Yep.
We definitely can top this group with the players that we have if they're playing on the top of their game. And I think, Bosnia, I think, is a little bit of a wild card. They're a pretty young team, a team that I think can cause some problems, and I think a team that we'll be lucky to win against. I think they'll be a very hard team to beat, seeing how they played against Italy. And I think they'll be a team that kind of moves up the world rankings a lot after the World Cup. But, against Bosnia, Qatar, and Switzerland, those are winnable games. None of those teams scream, World Cup winners or even really teams that you think will necessarily go far. And I think it's a group that you need at least 6 points out of, and a group that I think we can get 6 points out of.
I think we can. I mean, you talk about, like, you look at, the teams. Like, Switzerland, I think, is going to be one of our hardest opponents. Obviously, they're, like, 12th in the world right now. But they're, they're an aging team. Switzerland, a lot of their best players are over the age of 30. And I think they're trying to bring a new age to their team. Obviously, they have Kobel, who's played decent in net. But I think they're a team that we can definitely beat. Qatar has, I think Qatar, they played well when trying to qualify for this World Cup. Obviously, last World Cup, they didn't really play well in their home nation. I think they have a lot to prove. But again, like, if you talk about where Qatar's playing comparatively, like, I don't think their road to the World Cup was as difficult as if like a UEFA team like Bosnia Herzegovina, for example, having to beat Italy, and they did. obviously beating them in penalties. I think Bosnia and Herzegovina are going to be a team that I think surprises a lot of people. I think they could be a dark horse in this group. Maybe this group is going to be Bosnia and Herzegovina and Canada gang out. Potentially, maybe 1 and 2. But we also got to say, like, as well, remember there's that third place. So I think with Canada, we have to get enough points so that even if we get third place, we are the top of third place and we can move on to the round of 32. Obviously, I think Bosnia is going to be a very hard team to face. They have a lot of young talent, and one thing I saw was their wingers. Their wingers are so talented with the ball. One of them tried to do a Rabona cross. It didn't go off well, but they tried, and that's like that confidence, especially when you're tied 1-1 against Italy in extra time is just really cool to see. Obviously, one of their wingers, I forgot his name, but he plays for PSV. He scored the winning penalty, and he's actually from the United States, so it's kind of coming back to where he was born, and he might have a kind of a fire to want to get to the United States to play within the round of 32, obviously, because this group is going to be played mainly in Canada. And I think it's going to be, like, only time will tell. I think Canada needs to get better. And I think with Promise David coming back and Davies is coming back, that will be our biggest kind of...
But Alistair Johnston's out for the rest of the season.
Yeah, most likely he won't come to the World Cup.
Which kind of confuses me because, he was training with the team. I don't know what changed that.
Maybe he was just like, you know what, because like maybe not repeat the injury. I don't know. All right, we're kind of done the episode here. So... we talked about a lot. We had our first recap. We talked about CPL football, obviously CPL season, and more to come on that being only the first match week which is, I always found weird because not all the teams played. So it's like the first match week, but like not the first match week because, and never mind, because Toronto and Super haven't played. And of course, Team Canada's woes with the couple friendlies that we had. And you know what? Looking forward to what Canadian football can bring for this summer, seeing that we have the World Cup, Canadian Premier League, and the MLS to look forward to. All right, Zach, can you do the sign-off, please?
Bonjour, au revoir, and have a great rest of your week.
See you later, guys.